Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. For this deep dive, you guys have really sent us a ton of stuff on like achieving a simpler life and finding bliss, ancient wisdom, modern research, like all of it. And it's really cool stuff, but I know it can kind of feel overwhelming, Like, where do I even start with all of this?
Well, that's what we're here for,
Yeah.
To help you sift through it all and find those golden nuggets, the stuff that really resonates.
Exactly. Okay, so let's jump right in. I feel like a lot of us struggle with this, right? Like, we know we should meditate and eat better and declutter, but actually, like, doing it consistently, sticking with it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, we have this resistance to change. Like, it's built in, but that's what's so cool about yoga. It's not just the poses, it's a whole way of thinking about it, a philosophy about those roadblocks and how to, like, move forward skillfully.
Oh, skillful action. I like that. So what are some of the obstacles yoga talks about?
Well, Patanjali, he's like this key figure in yoga philosophy, right? And he identified some things we all struggle with. Distractions, putting things off to later, self-doubt, anything that throws us off course, really.
Okay, yeah. I definitely relate to all of those. But, like, how does yoga suggest we deal with distractions? My phone alone is a black hole for my attention span.
Oh, I know, right? The sensory overload these days is insane. But the sources you guys sent actually have some practical solutions. One thing is breaking down those big, overwhelming tasks into smaller steps, right? So it's not so daunting. And another is being mindful of, like, sensory inputs, like choosing to spend less time on your phone or creating a peaceful space for yourself.
That's interesting. I've been trying to be more mindful about my phone use, and just putting it in another room honestly helps. It's like I can finally think straight.
Exactly. It's all about reclaiming that mental space. Another thing the sources talk about is diet. The idea of a sattvic diet. It's all about those pure whole foods that promote clarity and calmness.
Oh, wow. So food affects our mental state. Makes sense. When I eat a lot of processed junk, I definitely feel kind of foggy.
Yeah, there's a huge connection there. Which leads to a key point. How do we get control over our thoughts? Because even with an ideal environment, that inner chatter is still there.
Oh, tell me about it. My mind is nonstop sometimes. So does yoga address that mental chaos?
Absolutely. Patanjali, he emphasized calming those fluctuations, the mental ones, through practices like mindfulness and meditation.
Right. But does just sitting there focusing on your breath actually do anything? There's so much research out there now.
And the research really supports it. Studies show that mindfulness can help reduce rumination. That's like dwelling on negative thoughts. And it improves cognitive flexibility so you don't get stuck in those mental loops.
Wow, that's encouraging. I've tried meditating a little, and it's amazing how much it brings you back to the present moment, like hitting a reset button on your brain.
Such a good way to put it. What's interesting is this idea of mental control, it connects to a deeper mind-body-soul connection in the sources you sent.
Okay, so it's deeper than just positive thinking. It's like a way of being.
Exactly. Patanjali, he saw self-discipline, self-study, and surrender to something bigger than ourselves as key for integrating, mind, body, and spirit.
Those sound pretty intense. But I do think there's something to that idea of aligning those different parts of ourselves. Like, when I'm taking care of my physical health, I feel better mentally and emotionally too.
And there's more and more research supporting this. It's called psychoneuroimmunology, and it's exploring how thoughts and emotions actually impact our immune system and overall health.
That is wild. It's like our bodies are always listening to our thoughts. So it sounds like we're talking about a really holistic approach to well-being. But how do we actually, live this way?
It all comes down to finding ease and stability in our actions. Effortless effort, if you will. And guess what? Patanjali had something to say about this too. He really emphasized finding balance in everything we do.
This is so fascinating, but I'm always rushing around. How can I find ease in that?
It's about being intentional, right? Making choices on purpose. This ties into the concept of minimalism, which the sources explore too. Studies show that decluttering both your physical space and your mental space can reduce stress, and you'll be more productive.
Love it. Less stuff, more clarity.
Exactly. And it's not just physical clutter. It's about letting go of mental clutter, too. Those endless to-do lists, the worry, the feeling overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah. I feel that. So how do we declutter our minds? Any tips?
Prioritizing is huge. Figure out what truly matters and set boundaries on your time and energy. And then there's mindfulness. Bring your attention back to the present moment. It's like training your mind to let go of the noise.
Less multitasking, more being present. Got it. So meal planning and digital detoxes, those are helpful, right?
Absolutely. They're all about reducing decision fatigue giving your mind a break from the constant stimulation. It's about creating a rhythm for your day that supports calm and intention.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm starting to get a clearer picture of how all this fits together. But is there like a roadmap? Where do we even begin with all of this?
Patanjali actually offered one. It's called the 8 Limbs of Yoga. It outlines a path for personal and spiritual growth.
Whoa, 8 limbs. Okay, that sounds intense, but I'm guessing it's not as overwhelming as it sounds.
Think of it as a personalized action plan. You're drawing on ancient wisdom, but making it your own, tailoring it to your life and your goals, and you don't have to master all 8 at once. Even small changes, little by little, make a huge difference over time. It's like forming new habits, one step at a time.
Okay, that makes me feel better. So it's not about a complete life overhaul. It's about making those consistent shifts towards simplicity and bliss.
Exactly. And the research on habit formation backs this up. Setting realistic goals, being consistent, that's the key to lasting change. It's those little wins, they build up over time.
Okay, that's encouraging. I love how these sources use stories to illustrate these ideas. It's not just philosophy, it's wisdom in action.
Those stories can be so powerful. They bring the teachings to life and help us really connect with them.
One that stuck with me was the story about Rishi Dattatreya and the golden deer. Have you heard of it?
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful story. All about finding contentment in simplicity.
So there's this sage, Rishi Dattatreya. He lives this super simple life up in the Himalayas. Very few possessions. Spends his days meditating and sharing his wisdom. And this young guy named Arjun goes to him. He's seeking peace and happiness. And the sage, he tells this story about a golden deer that everyone's chasing after. They all think it'll bring them fortune and bliss.
Just chasing an illusion, right?
Exactly. But then, this humble farmer, living a simple life just like the sage, he runs into the deer. He doesn't chase it. He just admires it and keeps going. And guess what? The deer follows him home.
What a metaphor, right? For how inner peace works. It's not chasing stuff, it's about cultivating contentment. Then, the good stuff comes naturally.
That's what Arjun learns. Real happiness comes from within, not from things. And he finds his own peace by embracing simplicity and discipline, just like the sage.
It reminds us that sometimes the simplest things are the most meaningful.
There's another story, it's a little more intense, but I found it so interesting. The story of Raktabij and Devi Durga. Have you heard this?
Oh, yes. It's a classic.
Yes.
Good versus evil.
So Raktabij is this super powerful demon, and he has this crazy ability. Every drop of his blood that hits the ground creates a clone of himself.
Wow. Hard to defeat.
Right, it's like a symbol for how our negative thoughts can multiply out of control if we don't deal with them. But then there's Devi Durga, this fierce goddess, and she steps in to fight him.
That divine consciousness that's within us all.
Yes, and she realizes to defeat him, she has to stop his blood from hitting the ground. So she fights him, and she drinks every drop of blood that spills.
Wow, that's intense. It's showing us how to deal with our own battles, right? Distraction, fear, negative.
And Devi Durga, she wins. It reminds us that we have the power to overcome those negative forces that try to get us down.
That inner strength we all have to turn darkness into light.
These stories make these ancient concepts so much more relatable. It's not abstract philosophy, it's wisdom we can use right now.
For sure. Speaking of applying ancient wisdom, there's one more thing the sources go into that's a little mysterious. The idea of spiritual attacks.
Okay, now we're getting into shadowy territory. I'll be honest, I'm a bit curious, but also a little apprehensive. Have you ever felt that kind of negative energy, like something's trying to hold you back?
It's not always obvious, but the sources give us some clues to recognize those signs, and more importantly, how to protect ourselves.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. I guess we'll have to explore those shadowy depths in part 2 of this deep dive. Okay, so we're back, and we're going to delve into this whole spiritual attacks thing. I gotta admit, I'm a little out of my comfort zone here, but I'm trying to be open-minded. So, where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, I think it helps to start with, what do the sources even mean by spiritual attack, right? Basically, it's this idea that negative energies can influence us in ways we might not always recognize.
Okay, so not like ghosts and demons,
yeah,
right? More like bad vibes.
Wow.
I know that sounds kind of simplistic, but...
No, I think that's fair. It's about recognizing we're all energetic beings, and we can be affected by the energy around us, the good and the bad.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. But how do you know if it's a spiritual attack or just, regular life stuff, which can be tough enough?
That's such a good question. And the sources, they actually offer some potential signs to look out for. It's not about jumping to conclusions, but just being aware of the possibilities.
So, like, what are some red flags?
Well, they mention sudden health problems.
Right.
Or recurring ones. That don't seem to have a medical reason. Or, like, unusual emotional swings, big mood changes out of nowhere, or anxiety, fear.
Not just your average ups and downs, but more extreme.
Yeah, exactly. And they also talk about, like, constant money problems, even when you're doing everything right, or relationship issues that come out of the blue.
Wow. Okay. Those are some serious signs. Makes you wonder, though, how much is actually a spiritual attack and how much is just life, you know?
That's where you got to use your judgment. It's about noticing patterns, trusting your gut. If you're seeing a few of those signs, especially if they're intense or feel out of your control, then yeah, maybe dig a little deeper.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say someone does think they're under spiritual attack.
Yeah.
What can they actually do?
Well, the sources are very clear. You're not powerless. There are things you can do to protect yourself, to build up that positive energy.
Okay, that's good to hear. So you're not just a victim. You can fight back.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming your power. And one big recommendation, strengthen your spiritual practice, whatever that means for you.
Oh, like prayer, meditation, chanting, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Connecting to that higher power, creating a spiritual shield, you know.
A spiritual shield. I like that. It's like boosting your spiritual immune system. The stronger your connection, the less vulnerable you are to those negative energies.
That's a great way to think about it. Strengthening that inner light to push away the darkness. And the sources also talk about who you surround yourself with. Positive people, supportive people.
So good vibes only.
Pretty much. It's about minimizing contact with people who drain you or have those negative intentions, even if they don't realize it.
Oh, I've totally felt that. Like being around someone and just feeling drained afterward. So setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Protecting your own energy.
Exactly. And be careful about who you share personal stuff with. They talk about energy vampires, people who just suck the emotional life out of you.
Oh, energy vampires, I know a few.
Yeah,
But it's not always other people, right? Sometimes those negative thoughts come from within.
totally. And that's where those mindfulness practices are key. Meditation, being aware of the negative thought patterns, and choosing to focus on the good stuff instead.
Okay, so it's two sides. Protecting yourself from outside negativity and building up that inner strength, that positivity.
Exactly. And the sources mention things like protective talismans, amulets, if that's something you're into.
Crystals. Like
Yeah, anything that has meaning for you brings you a sense of peace and protection, little reminders of your own strength.
You know, I actually really like that. Having those little things that make you feel safe and connected.
It's not about living in fear. It's about empowerment. Taking action to protect your well-being.
So even when facing those, potentially scary things, you have the choice to choose light over darkness.
Exactly. And the sources are very specific. Don't fight negativity with more negativity. Responding with love and compassion can actually help dissolve those bad energies.
That's a powerful message. Rise above. Stay true to your own light.
And ultimately, it's about trust. Trusting that you have the strength, the support to get through these challenges.
Okay, so we've talked about signs of spiritual attacks and ways to protect ourselves. But what actually attracts that negativity in the first place? Do the sources say anything about that?
They do. And it's interesting, a lot of the things they mention are also obstacles to living a simple, blissful life.
Oh, that makes sense. Like the stuff that drains us, creates that inner turmoil. It also makes us vulnerable to those outside forces.
Right. Some of the main culprits they talk about: fear, anger, resentment, jealousy. Anything that lowers your vibration keeps you in that negative headspace.
So it's not just about outside protection, but also about cultivating inner peace and harmony.
For sure. Creating an environment inside you that's not so welcoming to those negative energies. And that's where all those practices come in. Mindfulness, meditation, self-care, connecting with nature, strengthening that spiritual connection.
So the more aligned we are with that positive energy, the less room there is for the negativity to take root.
Exactly. Raising your vibration, becoming a light for yourself and for others.
Love that. Okay, we've covered some serious ground here. Spiritual attacks, protection. It's a lot to process. But before, we were talking about that ideal daily routine the sources offer as a guide to a simpler, more blissful life.
And it's interesting, isn't it, how many of those practices also act as spiritual protection?
Totally. It's like creating a life that nourishes your mind, body, and spirit also builds up this shield of positivity around you.
Exactly. It's about those choices, those conscious choices that support your well-being and bring you into alignment with that higher vibration.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired to look into that routine more. It feels like a really practical, empowering way to create a more fulfilling life, inside and out.
And that's exactly what we're going to explore in part 3 of this deep dive.
Okay, so we're back and ready to explore this ideal daily routine. It sounds kind of like a recipe for bliss, but I gotta be honest, I'm not sure I'm ready to be up at like 5 a.m. every day.
I hear ya. The timings are really just a suggestion. The main thing is understanding what's behind them, the principles. Like those early hours, they're traditionally seen as more peaceful. Good for spiritual practice, but you can adjust it to your own life, for sure.
Oh, okay. That makes me feel better. So what does this ideal routine actually look like?
Well, they start with waking up early, yeah. Ideally around 5 a.m. to kind of be in tune with nature's rhythms. Then like 15 to 20 minutes of quiet reflection, just checking in with yourself. And doing some pranayama, those breathing exercises.
Right, setting the tone for the day with breath work and self-reflection.
Exactly. Then it's 30 minutes of yoga, followed by 15 minutes of meditation.
So easing into the day with movement and mindfulness. No need for that caffeine jolt. I could actually get into that.
Then around 6:30, they recommend a walk, like 20 minutes, barefoot on grass if you can, connecting with nature, absorbing that grounding energy.
Oh, I love that. Starting your day with a little nature boost. What comes after that?
Gotta eat right. Healthy breakfast, seasonal fruits, nuts, whole grains, simple stuff to nourish your body.
Okay, so we've got a pretty mindful morning routine. But what about the rest of the day? Does it stay this zen?
Well, daytime kind of shifts to, work mode, focused work from 8 a.m. to noon, but with breaks. Every hour, take a little time to stretch, refresh.
Makes sense, gotta avoid burnout.
What about lunch? They recommend a good lunch around 12:30, salads, easily digestible stuff, light, so you don't get that afternoon slumps.
Ugh, that afternoon slump is the worst. Been there. Light lunch, and then what? Back to work.
Actually, they say take a little walk after lunch and some time to relax, read a bit, close your eyes, just a little midday reset.
Oh, I like that. Little moments of rejuvenation throughout the day. Then it's back to work, I'm guessing.
But from 2 to 5, it's work time again. But they suggest mixing it up, spiritual reading, music that lifts you up, activities that feed your soul. It's about keeping that connection going all day.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget about the things that actually bring you joy. What happens when work is over?
Well, around 5:30, they suggest lighting a daya, that oil lamp we talked about, in your workspace and at home. It's about creating a peaceful atmosphere as you transition out of work mode.
A ritual to end the workday, bring in the calm, I dig it.
Right. Maybe have some herbal tea, anything to help you unwind.
Okay, sold. So what does the ideal evening look like?
Around 6 p.m., it's exercise time. Yoga, brisk walk, anything that gets you moving releases that energy from the day.
Gotta get that movement in, even after work.
Exactly. Then at 7, back to those spiritual practices, meditation, chanting, prayer, whatever feels right for you, ending the day like you started it.
Love that symmetry. Starting and ending with stillness and connection. What about dinner?
Dinner by 7:30, again, focusing on light, easy to digest foods. Give your body a chance to rest before sleep.
No late night snacks.
Ideally not. But if you gotta have something, keep it light, a piece of fruit, some nuts. Then around 8:30, it's time for reflection. Gratitude.
What a great way to end the day. Appreciating the good stuff, letting go of negativity.
And then getting ready for a good night's sleep, relaxation techniques, making your bedroom a calm space, even lighting a daya to keep those negative vibes away.
I love it. A whole sleep ritual. Sacred time for rest and rejuvenation. So when are we hitting the hay?
They suggest aiming for 9.3. Getting enough sleep is super important. It's when your body and mind really heal.
So this whole routine is basically a guide to living a balanced, mindful, spiritually connected life.
That's it. Bringing those ancient practices into modern life in a way that supports our well-being.
Sounds amazing, but also a bit much, if I'm being honest. Not sure I'm ready for a complete life makeover just yet.
And that's totally fine. It's an ideal, not a rule book. Take inspiration from it, adjust it to your life.
Find the stuff that clicks with you and work it in step by step.
Exactly. Find what works for you. Make those little changes. They lead to a more blissful life. Remember, progress, not perfection.
This routine really shows how important structure and intention are for a simpler, more fulfilling life. It's not about adding more to your to-do list. It's about creating a rhythm that feeds your soul.
Finding that balance between effort and ease. That flow state where you're not constantly pushing, but moving through life with grace,
I love that. It feels freeing. Like you're not just along for the ride. You're steering the ship.
And that's what this whole deep dive has been about, right? You have the power to create a life that's full of simplicity, bliss, and positive energy.
Even with all the craziness of modern life, you can find that inner peace.
Exactly. And it starts with those small steps, the conscious choices, building those positive habits.
Well, listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you some good insights, inspiration for your own journey to a simpler, more blissful life. And remember, you're not alone. There's a whole community out there trying to create a more peaceful world.
So keep those questions coming. And until next time, happy simplifying.
See you on the next deep dive.